Welcome back.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Time to get serious because we have one of the top executives and top creatives in the games industry.
We have the legend.
The legend, Tim Willits himself. 24 years, over 24 years working for id Software, creating amazing games and leading the company for many of those years.
He's an expert in finding the soul of a game. Sometimes it's the most elusive, the most difficult thing to find. What is the spark, the character that makes a game a real success, something special.
Yeah, the difference between a successful game and a good game is just that little thing that Tim calls the spark of the soul of the game. And he's now challenging, facing that challenge in a new company, in Saber Interactive, as Chief Creative Officer, new chapter in his professional life. And we are just so grateful that Tim has decided to share with us a little bit of his knowledge in finding that soul, that spark of game.
And to interview Tim in this new chapter of his career is Chris Morris, who is not a video game journalist, but
he's not exactly. Yeah, he's more like a kind of a business journalist, no? Working, writing for CNBC, Time, Fortune, all those great media outlets, general media outlets. Yeah. But he is a gamer inside. He's a gamer at heart. Exactly.
Passionate about games. So. And I think that they know each other, so the conversation is going to be quite fluent.
Yeah, well, they know each other quite well, and I know they could be talking for hours about this particular topic they both loved. They promised they will talk for a little less than an hour. That is the time that we have, but we are so looking forward to listen to them.
For sure. So time to say hello.
Time to say hello to North Carolina, where Chris is, and to Texas, where Tim is. Hello. Tim, hello, Chris.
Ivan, thank you for having us both. Tim, thanks for taking part in this. I think the best place to start, like Ivan was saying, is the best games are the ones that know what they want to do. They're very crystal clear, and then they execute on that with precision. Now, some people call that the game mechanics. Some say it is playability. You call it the soul of the game. Can you tell me, from a 500-foot view, what do you mean by that? Can you expand on it some? And, what is the soul of a game?
So that's a great question, and I know that people have been chasing kind of this answer for a long time. But for me, the kind of the soul or the spirit of the game it's kind of like the core gameplay experience and how it makes you feel and what emotions that it brings up in you as a player. What is that simple one sentence, X is like I like to call it, or what's that one simple description of what a game is, and that everything else is built around that particular thing, that spirit, that soul. And I know it sounds like mystical talk, but game developers who understand at the very core of what they're making will make better games.
So can you give some examples of this, of what the soul of certain specific games are, whether they're ones you've worked on or ones you've played that really stood out to you?
Yes. So, again, Everyone loves the the brand new Doom game that id Software released, Doom Eternal this year, and then Doom 2016 and 2016. The team at the time when that game was in development really focused on the simple thing that made that game exciting. That was, destroying demons with. There's actually a line that the team used. It's like the Doom Slayer. Use devastating weapons to fight incredible and unpredictable demons. Combine weapons, abilities, and skill to knock down, slash, stomp, and crush the enemies in never seen before. Or like Quake Champions. That soul that game was pure FPS. In Rage, it was be the ultimate road warrior to rule the wasteland. And in SnowRunner, a game that we at Saber just released, the core of that game is driving cool trucks through snow and mud. And then World War Z is that second to second moment where you are in combat with the hundreds and thousands of zombies. So when you can explain a game down to the one sentence, and the gameplay kind of encapsulates that sentence, that is that soul, that spirit, or that X. Make sense?
So yeah, so is it like an elevator pitch? If we're thinking in Hollywood terms, it's a way to sort of compress the spirit of the game into a single sentence or something like that?
Yes. So for game developers and game directors, you need to communicate that to your team all the time, repeatedly. So it has to be distilled down to something that people can easily understand and they can easily remember. So a team. Most people assume that a game development team, everyone knows what they're making all the time. But what happens is that everyone on a team has their own ideas and their own feelings and their own opinions on things. And everyone tries to kind of get in something into the game that, they're passionate about. So as a game director, if you can clearly identify that soul or that one sentence, that becomes a lens or like a filter of which all decisions will pass through. So, for example, on World War Z, it's swarms of zombies. So if it's the moment combat of swarms of zombies, then when every single person on the team is working on something and they all have decisions to make, they need to think of the game through that lens. They need to ask themselves, is this thing that I'm going to put in the game, or is this art that I'm going to make, or is this, this technology that I'm going to add in, does it fit within that one sentence explanation? And if it does, then you're good to go. If it doesn't, then you're making a bad decision. Make sense? I know it was a long answer.
No, that's the wrong long answers. But is it something that people can, as they're trying to justify their ideas, so they're like, I love this idea, I think it's a really cool play mechanic, maybe it doesn't quite fit with the one sentence description, but I can manipulate it in my head to say that it does. Does that create some big leadership challenges?
Yes, because it does, because it is, as a game director, if you cannot distill down that core concept into a single phrase or a very short description, then you're probably all over the place, and your game is going to be all over the place. And if you can't capture the spirit or the soul, and again, you can't just. Sometimes the spirit and the soul can shift a bit, but if you don't focus on a single idea or a single kind of gameplay pillar or few pillars, then you're going to be all over the place. So it is a leadership challenge.
Yeah. Is the soul of the game? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I was going to say, is the spirit or soul of the game something that is consistent over the course of a franchise. So let's take Doom for example. The soul of the game, blowing up monsters in great gory fashion with really cool weapons would be my elevator pitch for that game. Um, is that something that has to carry to every new version of the game, or can that evolve as the game and the franchise evolves?
So that's a really good question, and um, you know what? It really can't. And let me explain why. And I can say this because I made some of the Dooms. So if you remember Doom 3, it was hugely successful, so millions of copies. But it did take a a slower, much darker, more horror path. And that experience that players had when they played the original Doom 1 and Doom 2 in the mid 90s, that how it made you feel, and the speed and the excitement, and destroying these demons, was kind of shifted to a more horror, scary, survival approach. And it kind of, the soul got a little disturbed. It got a little, it was a little off. And then when the team went and worked on the 2016 reboots and the new one, a lot of focus was put on, how the original made you feel, what was the spirit of the original, and how the team can create that and then layer on top of new features and technology and improvements. But I do think that as a franchise, and this may be controversial, but I do think as a franchise you should stick to what makes that franchise special, and then build off that. Don't try to change that.
Right. Yeah.
Would you agree?
And I think, yeah, I think so. I think if you look at the most successful franchises in this industry, they do often sort of stick to the same thing. Call of Duty, a war-based game, that has a really strong multiplayer where you're shooting bad guys. GTA, open exploration, and little kind of hidden gems around there as you search for them. Doom, shoot bad guys with really cool weapons, and you see this consistency in them, but they change it up enough. The details are different enough, and the technology advances are big enough that it is a different experience. I mentioned to you on our pre-call yesterday that I recently played the remaster of Command and Conquer and Red Alert. Game's 25 years old, and it's interesting to go back and play the original games that I played, back in the dark ages, and compare them to what the games are like today. It's a different game now, but the core mechanic is still very much the same. It's controlling your troops and positioning and the strategic elements of the game. I think that's what makes it fun. It makes it something you come back to.
Yes, I've been in meetings where we've talked about, especially now at Saber, where I work with different companies and different games, where I've been in meetings where developers have said, let's take this idea and go in a different direction. And I'm like, my immediate reaction is like, no, let's take what's great about that idea and enhance it and improve it. Let's not go in a different direction. Because if you're going to go in a different direction, make a new game. And sometimes games that franchises that have taken it in a different direction may have been good, but it would have been easier if they just would have called it a different game. And then the baggage and expectations and wishes of people that love that franchise, you don't have to worry about that. There's always a trade-off between brand recognition and free marketing, and then expectations and baggage that you have with an old IP or an old franchise. So it is very tricky.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I think the best example of a company that tried a different play mechanic. It didn't quite work, but they were able to spin it off. Is maybe Ubisoft. If you think back to Raymond, the Rabbids got their start in there. They were just part of the game, and they realized, yeah, this is fun, but it doesn't necessarily work in a Raymond game. So let's make them their own franchise, and it's turned into this monster for Ubisoft.
Yes, 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 and you can do that across platforms too. Like Fallout Shelter. Very successful mobile experience. Definitely not a Fallout game. So those things work as well because the expectations and memories that players have of that franchise can be drastically different. But again, if players have an expectation of what they will experience and what they will do in your game, and you don't deliver that, then you really start to run into problems. And the best way to do that is with another franchise, a different game, or a different platform.
Do you run the risk with people on your team seeing the success of other franchises and thinking, oh, we can incorporate elements of those into our game? We've seen a lot of it recently with the Battle Royale games as Fortnite and PUBG have taken off. I think pretty much everybody has tried to emulate the success of Call of Duty at some form or fashion in their games. I mean, how do you balance that? I mean, how do you not have Call of Doomy or something like that?
Yes, Call of Doom. The game sprawl, idea sprawl is, definitely a problem. And that comes from really the leadership and the game directors. They need to focus on that core idea and the pillars that support that core idea. So the best, one of the best ways to communicate this with your team is in every team meeting, in every company-wide presentation, the very first slide of your deck, and these are internal decks. The very first slide needs to be the core of the game, some piece of art or some imagery that kind of encapsulates that experience in that core, and then to re-hit on the pillars of your game. And it may seem repetitive, and your team will be like, okay, we hear this all the time, but you should just have that up on the screen as people are filing into the meeting room as a constant reminder that what's important in the game and what are the pillars of the game, so you don't have feature sprawl, design sprawl, and then chasing ideas. And then chasing ideas is just, it takes so long anyways. A game takes 2-3 years to make. And if you see something you're playing now and 3 years from now, players may be tired of that as well. So you have to also be careful about, the time it takes to feature sprawl or feature crawl an item into your game.
Do you, this is a little bit off topic, but as we're in this new world where we're all, we're doing a conference from 2 different states that's based in Spain, and we're doing, we're working remotely, does that make it more difficult to stick to the soul and spirit of the game? Or does it make it in some ways a little bit easier?
That is a good question. We've, game developers are very good, about, sharing technology and understanding what they're working on. Actually, no, they're not very good. Sometimes we go off and do crazy stuff. That is a really good question. I do think the human kind of interaction and being together and talking through ideas over and over again is important. I live in Texas, and Saber Interactive has studios around the world, in Russia and in Spain and Portugal and Sweden, and I do a lot of meetings like this. But you're always more productive when you're actually together. And hopefully, the end of the world will be over soon, and we can all go back to our offices. But yes, I do think that you can tend to get a little game sprawly when you're sitting at home by yourself working on your kind of corner of the game. So as a game developer, I think now when everyone is working remote, it's actually even more important to stress on, what is the X of your game or your one sentence? What are the pillars? And I would recommend to game developers and managers to continuously send out emails and presentations and decks just to keep hitting on the core features of their game, and to ensure that every developer that's at home working is looking at the game through those core features. So that's a good question. And, and I think I will do that too. I think on some teams that I'm working with, I will remind them what is critical of the game that you're working on.
I'd like to apologize to the teams for the extra emails and decks that are coming their way right now. Give me an idea of when the soul of a game is created. Is that the genesis of the game, or does it come as you're sort of doing the initial thought process?
So if you're really lucky, you can capture that during the thought process in the beginning, but really it can evolve over time. And things shift. You just need to be careful that they can shift within kind of the parameters that you set up. But there are certain elements to games that evolve over time that become, truly special to the franchise. For example, Todd Howard, game director at Bethesda, loves to tell a story that, the dragons, which are pretty damn important in Skyrim, they had a defined role of what those dragons were going to work and how they were going to function in the game. And he said that he had one guy that just kind of took that entire system and ran with it. And, really expanded it, made them, did kind of almost like a bigger component of the game. And like now that's like the game, but that is one example of how, things can shift in a game and can really kind of alter the core kind of concept of a product.
Yeah, that's actually something I wanted to touch on. What do you do when you're in the development process and you learn that what you thought was the soul of the game really isn't? I mean, does that happen very often?
Yes. That's why prototype and getting things into the game and then iterating on those and finding kind of the fun or finding the spirit or finding the soul early is so critical. And taking a kind of not a post-mortem, but like a mid-mortem, where you kind of look at the midsection of your game and you have to ask the tough questions. And the only way to do that is to get the core mechanics of your game into your game and working quickly so you can test them. Like, for instance, if the game is unannounced, but at Saber we are working on a new multiplayer game. World War Z, we have 11 million players. Lots of multiplayer games are coming from us in the future, but we are working on a multiplayer game, and we are drastically changing, how the different players interact together. And we worked on this kind of new design, but we will not know if it's actually fun or actually works until we get it in the game. So the team is working as fast as they can right now to just get something in the game and working so we can play it, so that we'll know. And that's really critical, because we can't go too much further without knowing if we're on the right track.
That's a question I think a lot of developers know the answer to, but for other people that are watching this, how often do you get 1/3, 1/2 to that point where you need to see if you are acting on your vision and realize this isn't happening? We should just scrub this.
If you have a good publisher, if you have a understanding boss, you know, you may be able to get maybe one chance to reboot. You know, and I mean, there's always design adjustments along the way. That's why you get it in, you test it, you play it, you see if it's good, you move on. But like, for instance, everyone knows the story of Doom 2016. You know, we at id were working on a new Doom game. It was not capturing the soul of the franchise, and we did a major reboot. And at the time, it was a huge, you know, kick in the gut. But we made the right call, and worked out. And you know, history will show that, you know, that the franchise was rebooted, and it's a mega franchise. But we were very fortunate that, you know, our senior leadership allowed us to make that change. But most game developers do not get that luxury, because publishers spend a lot of money and they want something done. So you're kind of forced to complete what you made. So it's important to get your core concept into your game, test it, and make adjustments as quick as possible and as soon as possible before they become so expensive to change that you cannot change them.
Is it does it come down to protecting the soul of the game versus the CFO's vision of the game, or the stockholders' vision, or, you know, what's the balance that you have to strike between? It's the oldest question in this industry, between artist and business person.
Yes, you are absolutely correct. You need to. Okay, so there is a balance. So game directors that have a vision, that refuse to work with their brand team or their marketing team, will ultimately will struggle more than they need to. But if you have a good brand team and a good marketing team that understands the customer, understands the marketplace and the timing, they can help you kind of guide the game. Rage 2 is a great example of this. You know, as you know, the pink and over the top kind of personality of Rage 2 was a collaborative effort between Avalanche, id, and our incredibly great brand team at Bethesda. And you know, our brand team and our marketing team kind of looked at the landscape, looked at the personality of the game, looked at what we were trying to create, and worked with us on integrating in more of that over the top, you know, bright, colorful, kind of zany personality, which helped kind of you know, it did change the core concept of the game, but it kind of improved the experience, which made the core concept of the game more enjoyable.
Is that soul spirit of the game something that has to be incorporated into more than development, but also the marketing of the game externally, and you know, other components of getting a game on the streets?
Yes. So as a development team, once you identify what that one line description, like the original Rage, be the ultimate road warrior to rule the wasteland. From your package designer to your marketing team to the person that makes the TV commercials, if everyone understands that core concept, it will be easier for them to do their job. It'll be easier for them to make a commercial, easier for them to make packaging, you know, the image on the disc, the loading screens, you know, everyone from QA all the way up to the agency that's working on your key art. If everyone understands that core and what you're trying to achieve in the game, all those assets will be better. I mean, you've seen marketing for a game that is completely different than the game, and it's just like, what? Do these guys even play the game? So so it's important that everyone get in line.
Is it a challenge to get those people on board, because marketing has a job that's much different than a developer?
Yes, and I shouldn't say get in line. That sounds like you're being authoritative. It's kind of understand the line.
You're a chief creative officer. You're allowed to be a little authoritative.
Get in line. So as a yes, it is difficult. That is why you need to create that lens, that filter, that thing that people can look through when they make decisions. And it is the job of the game director or executive producer to like I said, make sure everyone that you talk to understands that. I have talked to teams, and I have done this as well, is whenever you meet with an outside agency or the QA department or the sales team, you start your presentation or you start your meeting with, some key art, that represents everything about the game. And then you start with that phrase that I keep talking about, what that X is, or the soul of the game. And then it just kind of reinforces that in their heads over and over again. And a lot of game directors and executive producers don't do that because they know what the game is so well that they just assume that the people around them know it as well. So it's really important to constantly hit the same thing over and over again.
And that brings in another aspect of all this that we haven't talked about, and that's ego. I mean, if you're the person who's come up with this core of the game and it starts to evolve through the course of development, or a marketing person comes in and says, hey, have you considered doing X, Y, or Z? I think the natural human reaction to something like that is to kind of bristle and say, no, this is my baby and I will protect it, even if it is, ugly. So, how do you deal with something like that? How do you balance it?
That is a huge issue. Yeah, I have seen that time and time again. Bad game directors or bad managers that refuse to listen to ideas unless those ideas are their ideas. And they also surround themselves with people that are less talented than them. The best game directors, the best executive producers understand that 9 out of 10 ideas that they have are bad. And they surround themselves by people far more talented than themselves. Those are the people that are successful. And if you can live with the fact that most of your ideas are going to be bad, but when you have a good idea and you have a team that supports that idea, it can be a brilliant idea. It's kind of like golf. I'm the world's worst golfer, and 50 shots that I do, 49 will be terrible shots, but I get that one shot and it makes everything worthwhile. You get that one idea out of all your bad ideas, everything is worthwhile. So surround yourself by people far more talented than yourself. Come up with ideas as fast as you can and have people shut them down, because you get that one idea and it can be $1 billion idea. But yes, that is a huge problem in our industry, is egos.
Yeah. Let's talk about pivoting when you do have an idea that's not quite right but needs to change some. Can you give me an example of the biggest pivot you have had to make in your career to ensure that the game was true to the soul?
Well, I mean, Doom, of course. That was a huge pivot and was hugely publicly pivoted. So it was even embarrassing because it's no fun when the world sees your mistakes. But let's see, what else is a good pivot? There's always smaller things like driving in the Rage franchises. I always kind of want to make realistic driving simulator. I've played a lot of racing games, and I thought that would be the way people would want to drive. And we quickly realized that it had to be more arcadey and unrealistic than realistic. The Even in Quake games back in the day, sometimes we try to have more kind of well, yes, we did try to take games in different directions a little bit, and then we always kind of came back to let's focus on the weapons and movement as offense and defense, and focus on incredible creatures. But I think the biggest one, of course, would be the Doom game.
Okay. Do you learn from, or actually, I'm sure you do, but what do you learn from those sort of public mistakes?
Yes. So you learn to make mistakes, learn from them, and move on. It's not the end of the world. No one likes to tell people that they were wrong. No one likes to think that their decision was bad or their game design was not going to work. But the more times that you come up with bad ideas, and the more times that you have trusted people around you that tell you that your idea is bad, but they still support you because they know that your next idea may be really awesome, will help you be more comfortable with making mistakes. Fear of failure is such a crippling thing that people have in any creative job. And fear of failure will lead to things like decision paralysis, where you're so afraid to fail that you're afraid to make a decision, or you're so afraid to fail that that you keep putting off making those decisions, and then you just procrastinate and procrastinate and procrastinate. And that is actually much worse for a development team than having an idea, putting it in the game, finding out it's no fun, and changing. Is far better, and it makes it a healthier environment than being paralyzed by fear. And you know what? We're all insecure, especially us creative folks, because everything that we do is subjective. Is it better blue or is it better green? They're both fine, and is this game fun or not? It's all just your opinion and someone else's opinion. And there are lots of times there are things that have gone into the games that I've created that I have not necessarily liked, but the people on the team had passion for it, and they thought that it would be cool, and it was cool, and it did work. So it's all in this kind of give and take. So you just have to understand that everyone's opinion can be correct, and it is your job to kind of balance all that input. But you cannot be afraid to make decisions that could be bad.
You talk about everyone has bad ideas. I always like to ask developers when I speak with them, and if you don't have an answer to this, it's fine. But is there an idea that, in retrospect, that never got made that you realize, oh man, that really was a stinker? And I'll give you an example. And it's not necessarily a stinker, but just something that didn't work out. A year or so ago, I was talking with Will Wright, and he said that one of the games that he wanted to make was being on the Hindenburg during its last flight. And it just never came together for whatever reason. But as you've been, through the course of your career, do you have any that stand out in your mind?
Yes, I have this game idea that I always thought would be cool, but it's probably terrible. It's called Rival Schools, and it is an RTS where you have your school, and then you have like another school, and then you have all these stereotypes. You got like the little sports jocks that are your muscle. And, you make like little cheerleaders and you send them out to distract the other team's, sports jocks. And then you have little nerds that are, so I was going to make an RTS based on all the stereotypes that you have in high school, which would be so bad because we're, as a society, we're actually trying to be more inclusive and understanding and stuff, and to make a game where you have RTS characters that are based on stereotypes of high school, and then attacking another high school would be terrible. I mean, it's brilliantly bad. But for years, I thought, we should make rival schools. So that's my terrible idea that no one
Who was
should
the
ever
protagonist? Was it a nerd as the protagonist, or did you choose?
Yeah, no, it's just an RTS. So it's like, my school is like Harding High School. It'd be like Harding High School versus, Johnson. And, Johnson High School can be either another human or just AI. Because I love first-person shooters, but I also like RTSs. And I thought, I could make an RTS. Yeah, that's my terrible, decisive,
I love it.
bad idea.
Well, tell me what you think the biggest single pitfall is that, and we're starting to run short on time here, so this may be our last question for you and me, but what do you think the biggest single pitfall is that developers face when it comes to staying true to the spirit of their game?
Man, that is true. Not believing in themselves, thinking that they need to add more things to their game to make it better. And sometimes you don't. I mean, look at SnowRunner. SnowRunner's a game we just released in the last few weeks. It currently has like an 80 Metacritic right now, which is awesome. And it is really a simple concept. It is, you have a cool truck, you're driving through the snow and the mud, and you're delivering stuff. That's it. And it's awesome. And millions of people love it. Because, the team focused on the core concept of that game and did not add a bunch of other crap that distracts from that. So you do not want to overburden your core concept, and you do not want to have, feature sprawl, and you need to believe in yourself. Many people could look at a game like SnowRunner, came from MudRunner, and say, well, that game there's nothing there. It's too simple. No one's ever going to like that. You need something more complex, but you don't if the core of the concept is fun.
Is it harder to pitch those games? I lied about that being last question. Is it harder to pitch those games with a single concept like SnowRunner?
Yes. I mean, Saber had worked on MudRunner before I came aboard, and when I would talk to the team, even before I was an employee, they'd be like, "Yeah, there's this game called MudRunner where you drive trucks in the mud," and I was like, "That's dumb." I will never. I said, "Do they blow up? No. Do they get attacked by aliens? No. Do you have guns on the trucks?" They're like, "No." And I was like, "Okay, that game's dumb," but it's brilliant. So yes, you are absolutely correct. They're very difficult when you have such an easy pitch. I mean, look at Quake. Run around with awesome weapons and kill each other, like that. But it just works because it's done really well.
I would imagine Quake was an easier pitch than SnowRunner, though, because at least there was an action element or something involved in that.
Yes, yes. I joke.
You've got to have. Well, let's make this really seriously last question before they get a hook and yank us off here. But if you are a developer and you've got this SnowRunner-like pitch, very simple, basic concept that doesn't have a strong action element or something that traditionally will appeal to a larger audience, how do you push that through? How do you stay true to your vision and still convince your game director or your publisher or whoever it is that this is a game that actually is going to take off and work, even if it sounds basic?
Yes. So get the core concepts into the game and playable as quickly as possible, so you can sit down and you can test it. The guy that kind of came up with the whole MudRunner concept, he was a physics kind of experiment physics challenge, and got the core concepts in as quickly as possible. And that is true for any game. Get your core concepts in your game as quick as possible in any format. They don't have to be pretty, they don't have to be great. Just get them in so you can test it, and you will know if you're onto something. And then get that in front of people who and have them play it so they can support your idea and your vision.
And how long does that usually take that you're able to get that core component built in to test and show?
Yeah, I mean, we have like first playable as kind of a milestone in production. So you have your kind of prototypes and your first playable, and you want to get your first, and then you have your vertical slice and your other milestones. That first playable will answer a lot of those questions, but that usually can take a few months. But hopefully, if you can get a core concept in like a few weeks, that's even better. But as soon as you can get it in, as soon as your team can believe in the vision, the better you are and the quicker you're off and running.
Sounds good. All right. Well, Tim Willits, Chief Creative Officer at Saber Interactive, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Chris.
And I think what we're going to do now is, I think we're going to open this up to Q&A from people that are
Thank you both of you,
well.
Tim and Chris and Tim. I don't know if you could stay hours talking. I'm sure you can, but we could stay hours listening to you guys talking about those incredible experience the team has in games, and it's very, very unique to have you here, both of you, actually. And I had a question, but I'm thinking about changing it a little bit because I had a question, but then you were talking about this rival school game, and I got a call from a friend that was already starting to draft in a design document for that, and he asked me if you could get more in depth in the design of the of the game. I'm sure in a year from now we will see that game coming up from some amazing indie developer. It's a great idea.
That's
indeed.
funny.
But
just make sure that it's not. If someone does that game, which could be fun, make sure they make it cute and fun, and not and don't play on any negative stereotypes. That's all. It's a very thin line between being funny and being
with soul, at least, right?
Yes.
They should keep it soul. Now for real, I have a question for you. You've been like 24, 25 years working for id Software. I don't know how much of interaction you had back then with developers and teams in other parts of the world, but now at Saber Interactive, you said that we know you are working with teams as you said, in Russia, in Sweden, I think, Spain for sure. I know that team, great team in Madrid, in Portugal as well. In this very short time that you have been working with all those teams, what are your learnings from working with teams from another country, and what is your your new vision about the global gaming development? I mean, how are other countries, continents catching up with the quality and the great games that we have been seeing coming from the US, or what are your feelings about the evolution of the global game development community?
There are slight differences between game developers in the States and in Spain and in France and in Russia. But in a bigger sense, everyone is the same. It's just the opportunity for people to make great games and to have that support. In America, we have these giant budgets, we have these huge kind of, size teams. And now we're seeing that we're getting much larger teams in other countries around the world, and they're making games that are just as good. It doesn't matter if you're a developer in Spain, France, Russia, or America. The core concepts of what you can do to make your game great are exactly the same. The slight differences between cultures is not really that big a deal. When it comes to developing games, the world is small. The world is shrinking, and we're all in this together, and we're all just trying to make great games. So I have found that, and thank God the whole world speaks English.
Yep, I agree with you. It's so small that we are able to have you both here today. I don't know if you are still hearing me. Okay. Well, I think we lost the connection at the last.
I think Tim's children woke up and the bandwidth is being sapped at his house now.
Okay. That was a slight technical problem at the very end that, even makes it look more natural, better in a way. So I wanted to thank you once again for your time. Thank you for your kindness, for sharing your experience and your knowledge with all of us, both you, Tim, and Chris. It's been amazing to have you here. And hopefully, as we said at the beginning, hopefully we can have that beer or whatever we want to drink and eat, either in Spain, the US, or in some other amazing place in the world. The world is very small, and we need to get back to certain normality and to enjoy it all together, all people together. Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Thank you.